the President, the Chamber declares the continuing of the proceeding. I would like Mr. Duch to continue the reading of the counts and the factual analysis. Please. The graph here. D. Preso. Duch said that Preso was not a place for interrogation or torture. While he is corroborated by some witnesses on this point, others stated that guards beat or insulted prisoners when they were sick or unable to work properly. Former S-24 detainee, witness O, mentioned the existence of a room where men and women were interrogated by electrocution, although she never physically witnessed these acts of torture. Another witness, witness P, described how colleagues who were sent to Preso would return with their head shaved and the skin flayed from the application of electric shocks, beatings, and whippings during interrogation. 3. Executions. Authority over executions. Over 12,380 detainees were executed at S-21. Duch said that he initially delegated responsibility for executions to Person C, who made all the necessary preparation upon his own initiative. However, following an incident where a prisoner was killed before the completion of his interrogation, Son Sen required Duch to sign off on every execution. Thereafter, Duch necessarily decided how long a prisoner would live, since he ordered their execution based on a personal determination of whether a prisoner had fully confessed. As there was no right to release, there was an implicit standing order from Duch as chairman to kill prisoners according to the system created at S-21. Witness Q stated that no one could be removed from S-21 without authorization from Duch. He claimed that Duch planned and ordered the execution of prisoners by annotating the removal list with instructions such as com, a short form of comtek, which means to smash. Witness B said Duch and Person C gave the orders to carry out executions within the S-21 complex. More specifically, he stated that Duch personally ordered him to kill a person at GMA, and that, as Duch looked on, he took an iron bar and killed a prisoner. Duch denies this incident took place. Duch stated that killing could be carried out on instructions he received and conveyed to his subordinates, or, as he stated in interviews prior to his arrest, upon his unilateral decision, after taking into account considerations such as overcrowding, lack of food, contagious illnesses, or the fear of escapes. Beyond specifically authorizing the execution of prisoners, Duch allegedly taught execution techniques. Witness B specifically recollected a meeting where Duch instructed that hitting their necks with the steel would not kill them, so their throat had to be cut too. Generally, prisoners were killed shortly after completing their confessions. However, Duch said he had the authority to delay the execution of certain skilled prisoners. He described this as a certain margin granted by the superiors, whereby person C and Duch could keep some prisoners to work within the S21 complex. He added, however, that they were all destined to be executed eventually. B. Executions at Kaing Guek. Due to the circumstances directly following the collapse of the Khmer Rouge, it is extremely difficult, considering the passage of time, to estimate with any accuracy the number of persons killed at Kaing Guek. However, with the testimony surrounding the system of executions at S21, in combination with execution logs, prisoner list, and a preliminary forensic survey, it is clear that many thousands of persons, including men, women, and children, were executed and buried at Kaing Guek. Although some witnesses denied ever seeing children there, at least one grave was described as containing the remains of children. An S21 execution log recorded that on a single day in July 1977, 160 children were killed at Kaing Guek. During the reconstruction conducted at Kaing Guek on 26 February 2008, Duch said he did not know how children were executed there, but he did not deny they were executed at this site. Witness B confirmed he saw Duch at Kaing Guek. Duch said that he went there only once, in 1977, at the request of Son Sen, and that he stayed only 10 to 15 minutes. Prisoners were transported to Kaing Guek in trucks 2 to 3 times a month. Witness B said they were transported in 2 vehicles, each containing approximately 30 to 40 prisoners. He said prisoners were told they were being transferred to a new home so that they would not scream during transport. They were then taken to the waiting trucks, handcuffed and blindfolded. During transportation, 2 guards were positioned in the rear of the truck so prisoners could not jump from the vehicles. According to Duch, 3 to 4 guards were stationed at Kaing Guek. When joined by the transport guards, there were as many as 10 guards present at an execution. There were 3 teams: the special unit, persons FF's team, and person GG's team. Duch said the methods of execution employed had existed since his time as secretary of M13. Beyond knowing that prisoners were blindfolded and had their arms tied behind them, Duch said he was not aware of the technical details of the executions. After arriving at Kaing Guek, a generator was switched on and the prisoners were led to a house. The guards then took prisoners outside, one at a time, telling them they were being transferred to a different house. Person I stood outside and recorded the names of prisoners before taking them to the pits to be killed. Several witnesses said that prisoners were killed using steel clubs, cat axles, and water pipes to hit the base of their necks. Prisoners were then kicked into the pits, where their handcuffs were removed. Finally, the guards either cut open their bellies or their throats. After the executions were complete, the guards covered the pits. Several large-scale executions also seem to have taken place at Chiang Mai. Duch declared that on 4 separate occasions, ordered him to send the majority of prisoners detained at S21 to Chiang Mai to be executed. The purpose of these executions was to make room for a large influx of prisoners following mass arrest. Duch admitted specifically ordering and implementing 2 mass executions. According to Duch, numerous mass executions occurred in which he received and conveyed orders to execute without interrogation. Duch confirmed his handwriting on a number of prisoner lists. On one list, he annotated, "To the attention of person FF, kill them all." 30 May 1978. Duch said this was an exceptional mass execution, though he could not remember the number of victims. On another, containing the names of 29 prisoners, he wrote, "Interrogate 4 persons, kill the rest." Duch declared that later, in December 1978, about 300 prisoners from the East Zone who had allegedly rebelled were sent directly to Chiang Mai and executed. He also stated that on the 2nd or 3rd January 1979, Person J ordered him to smash all prisoners at S21. Around 200 persons were transported to Chiang Mai and killed. According to Duch, it was the last time a mass execution was ordered. Witness L was an eyewitness to this mass killing, and other S21 personnel were aware of the event. Duch expressly admitted that there were 2 categories of persons sent to this last mass execution: Cambodian nationals and Vietnamese soldiers. C. Executions at Tuol Sleng. Duch and other witnesses declared that while Chiang Mai became the main killing site, certain important persons like Person K, Person A, Person T, and Person B, and foreigners continued to be executed within S21's grounds or nearby. Evidence on the case file demonstrates the presence of mass graves within and around S21. Duch, upon the request of his superiors, had pictures taken of important prisoners after they had been executed and buried. These pictures provided evidence that certain prisoners had not been released or escaped. According to Duch, he specifically remembered photographing 3 dead prisoners, namely Person Y, Person A, and Person T. In 1978, 4 foreigners were burned to ashes using vehicle tires between Mao Zedong Boulevard and Bang Tumpun. Person J allegedly ordered Duch to make sure the bodies could not be found. Witness E heard about this event but did not witness it. Witness R, a guard at S21, stated that in 1977, or 19, he saw a foreign prisoner being burnt alive using vehicle tires at the crossroad of Tul Tumpung Pagoda. Some prisoners were killed by having large quantities of blood withdrawn by medics. Witness E told investigators that no fewer than 1,000 persons were killed in this manner, indicating that this occurred to 20 to 30 prisoners every 4 or 5 days. Witness Q reported that person C ordered him to write a list of those detainees who had their blood drawn on 2 occasions, the first time for 2 prisoners and the second time for 4 to 5 prisoners. The case filed contains another list of prisoners who died in this manner. Former S-21 medic, witness S, noted that on one occasion he saw approximately 30 or 40 blood bags. Witness E recounted that 4 to 5 bags of blood were extracted in a process which left the prisoner unconscious and gasping. He added that, "When I saw this, I was strongly disturbed. When I tortured, I was not that disturbed. But when they took the blood, it was so terrifying. I have never forgotten it." The prisoners would die sometime thereafter, and a vehicle would transport the bodies to Kaing Guek for disposal. Evidence indicates that once blood was taken from a prisoner, it was subsequently sent to hospitals. Witness E told investigators that the doctors told him blood bags were sent to Monibung Hospital or to 17 April Hospital. Witness I was notified by other medics that blood was taken from prisoners and given to 8 hospitals outside S21. Former S21 guard, witness T, was told that there was a place for preserving blood called Srong to the east of Tul Slang prison. Duch denied any role in the taking of blood from prisoners. However, he would not dare to deny that blood was drawn from detainees held at S21. He stated that if there was a policy of blood extraction at S21, it must have been a continuation from when person B was chairman. But he said that he had no knowledge of the practice. Finally, a number of S21 personnel also affirmed that children were killed within the compound. Statements indicated that the children of prisoners were removed from their parents, killed, and buried north of the prison. One alleged method of killing involved dropping the children from the 3rd floor of the complex in order to break their necks. 4 combatants from a military unit that Duch recalled was designated Y08 were also killed independently after the last mass execution on the 2nd or 3rd January 1979. Duch said that on 7 January 1979, interrogator person HH killed these men using a bayonet, and that these were the bodies that remained left on the beds in S21 when the Vietnamese soldiers arrived. Part 2. Legal characterization. The judicial investigation demonstrated that while Duch was not a senior leader of democratic Cambodia, he may be considered in the category of most responsible for crimes and serious violations committed between 17 April 1975 and 6 January 1979, due both to his formal and effective hierarchical authority and his personal participation as Deputy Secretary, then Secretary of S21, a security center which was directly controlled by the Central Committee.
In view of the facts set out above in paragraphs 10 through 108, the co-investigating judges considered there is sufficient evidence to indict Kaing Guek Eav alias Duch and send him for trial for the following offences defined in the ECCC law and based on applicable law in 1975. A. Crimes against humanity. Common elements. S21 was specifically designed and authorized to detain and either reform or eliminate real or perceived political opponents of those in control of the Communist Party of Cambodia. The large number of individual crimes committed repeatedly at S21 also served to perpetuate and widen this attack based upon a constantly evolving notion of those persons considered a threat to the party. S21 operated as a political and military unit which reported directly to the highest levels of the party and detained a population composed primarily of civilians, as defined by international law, taken from every geographical zone and from virtually every administrative and military unit in Cambodia. Due to this position of authority at S21, Duch knew the purpose that S21 served and intended his actions to contribute to that purpose. Even if there were a requirement that the crimes committed at S21 have a correlation to an international armed conflict, it is clear that the attack proliferated as the conflict with Vietnam intensified. Notwithstanding an attack which may be characterized as against the civilian population of Cambodia in general, the crimes committed at S21 themselves constituted a discrete, widespread or systematic attack against the civilian population detained herein. Accordingly, the underlying criminal acts listed in Article 5 of the ECCC law, characterized below with respect to S21, were committed as part of a widespread or systematic attack at S21 directed against a civilian population on political grounds with knowledge of the attack under the customary definition of crimes against humanity in 1975. Imprisonment. There were no reasonable grounds and no legal basis justifying the arrest of the large number of individuals intentionally imprisoned at S21. Moreover, prisoners were clearly deprived of basic rights such as being informed of the reason for their arrest. There is no evidence that any legal or judicial system was established or functioned in Cambodia between 1975, April the 17th, and 6th of January 1979. There were no procedural safeguards, whether judicial or administrative, whereby detainees could challenge their imprisonment. Enslavement. Certain detainees at S21 and Prasor were forced to work. Strict control and constructive ownership was exercised over all aspects of their lives by limiting their movement and physical environment, taking measures to prevent and deter their escape, and subjecting them to cruel treatment and abuse. As a result of these acts, detainees were stripped of their free will. Torture. The vast majority of persons interrogated at S21 were repeatedly and intentionally subjected to severe interrogation methods, which often resulted in serious physical injuries and severe mental harm. These methods were designed for specific purpose of obtaining information or extracting confessions from the prisoners. Even if there were a requirement that perpetrators act in an official capacity, it is clear that in this case they acted in accordance with their defined roles within a clear command structure. Rape. There is evidence of at least one coercive sexual penetration committed at S21 when an interrogator inserted a stick into a female prisoner's genitals. Murder. At S21, personnel both directly and indirectly caused the death of a large number of detainees. In many instances, prisoners were deliberately killed through a variety of means. In other instances, the perpetrators may not have intended to kill, but were aware that death could occur as a result of their conduct. For example, when they beat or tortured prisoners. Extermination. The living conditions imposed at S21 were calculated to bring about the death of detainees. These conditions included, but were not limited to, the deprivation of access to adequate food and medical care. The unlawful death of over 12,380 detainees, which occurred as a result of murder or the imposition of living conditions calculated to bring about death, constituted the mass killing of members of a civilian population, evidenced by documentary records, eyewitness accounts, and the discovery of large numbers of bodies in mass graves. Persecution. The judicial investigation demonstrated that detainees at S21 were denied fundamental rights, including life, liberty, security of person, due process, and freedom of movement. These fundamental rights were denied or infringed from the moment their arrest and throughout the detention, interrogation, re-education, or execution. Detainees were denied these fundamental rights based upon their real or perceived political beliefs or political opposition to those in power in the CPK. Detainees were subject to arbitrary and unlawful detention, torture, enslavement, murder, and other inhumane acts. Duch was aware of these discriminatory policies by which S21 operated, and his intent to discriminate in accordance with these policies can be inferred from his actions. His positions at S21, his status as a CPK party member, and his relationships with the CPK leadership. Other inhumane acts. Prisoners at S21 suffered seriously bodily and mental harm from inhumane acts which included deliberate deprivation of adequate food, sanitation, and medical treatment. Prisoners were beaten and subjected to stringent restrictions during detention. These severe conditions, individually or collectively, depressed, degraded, and dehumanized detainees, ensuring that they were always afraid. B. Grave breaches of the Geneva Convention of the 12th of August 1949. Common elements. Armed violence between the regularly constituted armed forces of Democratic Cambodia and Vietnam began in April 1975 and increased in intensity until at least the 6th of January 1979. During this time period, hundreds of Vietnamese prisoners of war and civilians were arrested and sent to S21. Additionally, many other persons characterized by the DK as Vietnamese spies or of Vietnamese descent were detained. The vast majority of these prisoners were removed directly from combat areas. Many written and recorded confessions of these persons obtained under torture contained military intelligence or were broadcast and published by official CPK organs as part of the military propaganda strategy. Due to this position of authority at S21, which put him in repeated contact with military and political leaders, Duch was actually aware that crimes committed at S21 took place both in the context of the international armed conflict with Vietnam and against persons who either owed no allegiance to the DK or belonged to the adverse party of the conflict. Accordingly, the underlying criminal acts listed in Article 6 of the ECCC law characterized below constitute grave breaches of the Geneva Conventions of 1949 because they were associated with and committed in the context of an international armed conflict against protected persons in full awareness of the factual circumstances that established the conflict and the protected status of the prisoners. Unlawful confinement of a civilian. More than 100 Vietnamese civilians were detained at S21. There was no difference in treatment between Vietnamese civilians and other individuals subjected to imprisonment at S21. All were arbitrarily deprived of their liberty, willfully depriving rights to fair trial. At least 400 protected persons were willfully denied their rights to be judged by an independent and impartial court, as defined by the Geneva Conventions of 1949. In particular, the right to be promptly informed of their offenses, to be protected from collective penalty, to be protected by the principle of legality, or to be sentenced by a competent court. Willfully causing great suffering. These protected persons were willfully subjected to serious mental and physical suffering due to inhumane acts, which included deliberate deprivation of adequate food, sanitation, and medical treatment. Prisoners were beaten and subjected to stringent restrictions during detention. These severe conditions individually or collectively depressed, degraded, and dehumanized detainees, ensuring that they were always afraid. Torture and inhumane treatment. S-21 personnel willfully caused severe pain or suffering, whether physical or mental, to protected persons during interrogation. The purpose of using such methods within the course of the interrogation was to extract confessions aimed at obtaining military